What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. Let's talk about this idea of checking in, and not checking in like PCing or locking it up off a yard. That's a different check-in. But checking in on the streets, right? Particularly when you are quote unquote street gang affiliated. So it was a topic a while back, and then it's come up again because Quando Rondo and he didn't check in. His homeboy gay wag. Now he doesn't want to be in a gang anymore. If he ever really was, who knows? Um, But I thought it's interesting, man, because it applies differently in different groups, And you're gonna see the title, and are Mexicans the only ones that don't check in? Let me explain. Give me a second. It's not a long video before you jump to some crazy conclusions. So here's the thing. Generally speaking, what we're talking about is you're a part of a gang, right? That gang has other members, right? Has other subsets, other cliques, other branches, maybe is a good word, in other areas, right? Other areas of the state, other states, other countries, right? And so when you go to these other places that have branches from your crew, right? Your neighborhood, then you gotta go check in, right? You go tap in with the fellas in the neighborhood and see what's going on. And that's one way to see it, right? So, for example, the Quando Rondo thing, right? Like the hood that he claimed was a hood based in LA, right? But he's in Georgia, and there's people in Georgia that claim that hood under the same name as that LA hood. So he come to LA, but you don't check in. And I think, especially in the direction of if you're from one of the branches, but you go to the root, you really got to check in, right? The root may not even be aware of all the branches. Who knows? But if you're a branch, you got to go check in when you're over there at the root. So that's one element, and I think there's different reasons, right? And that's predominantly what I'm talking about right now is predominantly from my experience or my knowledge, Spencer, in the Black community, right? And it's not overarching stuff. It's not like, oh, you're a blood from California, so when you go to another state, you got to go find some bloods and be like, hey, what's up? It's specific hood shit. You know what I mean? Oh man, your hood is based off my hood. Um, that's the difference. That's the distinction. And there's not a ton of gangs, honestly, that have branches like that, hoods that have branches like that in different states. There's a few, but not a whole lot. And those that do oftentimes are rooted in California. So it makes sense, right? You come to California, you come to the area, you got to come tap in. When it comes to these artists and these big high profile people that I'm not saying Wanda Wanda was really high profile necessarily, but when it comes to artists, when it comes to celebrities, when it comes to people that are making money, at least in significant part based on them presenting themselves as a member of this neighborhood, right? A member of this hood, just like an out of state member of the hood or whatever, or they're a member of that hood, but they're now out of state, they're residing somewhere else. If you're out there blowing up and getting rich, then I think there's a particular interest that when you come back, you tap in, right? And I don't know the specific politics of these particular cliques or those particular cliques, but generally speaking, it would be expected that some of that love that you're getting when you're out there touring the country or in other states, flexing that you're a part of the neighborhood, that the neighborhood, the actual folks in the hood, reap some kind of benefit of that. Right now, if you're a real homeboy, if you're really from there, if you really like that, nobody's gonna have to tax you. Nobody's gonna have to extort you or anything else because you can be like, then it's my people. Like I made it out and I'm doing this, but I'm gonna look out for my folks. So it should be a more friendly gesture. Um, but sometimes it's not. And specifically when it comes to North and South, if you really, it doesn't matter if it's a friendly gesture or not, a gesture will be made, right? And so, but hoods don't check in, right? But there's not a lot of northern neighborhoods, at least, that have other, northern Mexicans. There's not a lot of Norteño neighborhoods that have branches specifically of that hood in another state. Now, people from that hood might go to another state and create a hood out there, but there's not many. And I know that some southern neighborhoods down south that they have that, especially like Nevada, Arizona, that area, Texas. So maybe that looks different for them, and maybe somebody can come and kind of tap in when it comes to that. But it's not common. It's not common for norteños and sureños to tap in or check in when they go outside of their immediate area. The exception is if you're linked up with the folks in prison, right? But that's not tapping in with a neighborhood. That's tapping in with something bigger, So that check in, yes, you will check in. Hey, when you go home, you go meet up with this dude and go talk to this dude. But that doesn't apply to everybody. That applies to those who say, hey, when I go home, I want to go hang out, right? So it varies. There's also, I remember spending some time with some Latin kings in Chicago. I got out to Chicago for, some stuff and met up with some people out there. One of them was a Latin king, right? Chicago's that's the home base necessarily of Latin kings, right? But he lived out of state, right? And he had become involved with that group out of state and lived out of state. And what we were doing out there was not anything, no criminal activity, no hustling, no nothing like that, right? It was on some community stuff, some legal stuff. Like we're operating on a different level. This was just a few years ago. But him and I are kicking it, man. We're having some drinks, and he's like, I said, what are you gonna do tonight? He goes, I gotta go check in with my people. And I was like, okay. And so we had a little conversation, and I'm not gonna get deep down into the details, but it sounded familiar to me, not familiar from my lived experience, but familiar, honestly, kind of like in what I hear with some of the Black neighborhoods, right? Where, yeah, bro, this is the motherland, and so, and he's grown, we're grown, we're in our 40s. So I gotta go tap in with the fellas, man, and kind of hang out and spend some time with them and see how they're doing. Even though I'm not engaged in any criminal activities, and none of these hoods are filled with people that exclusively engage in criminal activities. Let me just make that point clear. But and Latin Kings obviously is not a hood, right? They're bigger than that, but they have areas, and so he said, hey, whenever I come right here, I go tap in with the fellas, I hang out a little bit, and just kind of spend some time. Even though I'm not involved in this world anymore, if I didn't, it would as norteños say, right, it would have an adverse impact on your status, right? So he'd be looked at funny, right? But they're not extorting him. He's not paying a tax or a tribute or anything else. He's a working guy, just just like me. Like that's what we're out there for. But I think to show respect is kind of at the core of it. And if you're not a respectable person, it will show something. But I really think it is just to show respect. And all of us outside, Central Americans, right? Central Americans, cats that are caught up with Mara and 18 here in the States, right? You're engaged in that lifestyle, you go hop around. Yeah, you got to check in, right? You got to tap in with folks. But those are theoretically, those are your homeboys. Even though you may have never met them, they're your homeboys by some common thread, right? A similar worldview, a similar agenda, a similar upbringing, a similar culture, something that ties you in. And it's not always criminal, and it's not always violent, and it's not always destructive at all, right? But it's just something connects you to. And so when you're gonna go to a space where somebody like that is, go holler at them, right? Holler at them ahead of time. Now, I've never checked in a quote unquote gang sense, and I don't know a lot of raza that has, to be honest, or at least raza based out of California. However, I guess on some level, I do it all the time because I'm a little further up north now, but I'm from the Bay Area, and I've lived in multiple cities in the Bay Area. And originally, I'm from San Francisco. And honestly, when I go out to the city now, a lot of times I'll go out there and not reach out to anybody just because the city is such a different place. Specifically, where I came from in the city, uh, it different people are there no more, right? Like it's all gentrified, it's changed. Um, but like if I go to East Palo Alto, which is also gentrified and changed a lot, but I still got folks out there. I lived out there more recently. I started relationships with people there. Yeah, I'll holler and see who's out there, who's out and about. Um, Shit, if I go to Tracy, I know people in Tracy, and it has nothing to do with gangs, nothing to do with any of that. It's I got loved ones there. Um, it's if I go to Reno, it I check in with my brother because he lives up there, right? So it when I go somewhere that I don't normally kick it at, when I went to San Diego, I was going to San Diego a lot a while back, and I know some really cool gente down in San Diego, right? Raza from San Diego, uh, and always, what's up, man? Where you at, right? And sometimes we get a chance, we kick it, we get a bite to eat, we go cruise around. Sometimes we don't. And I'm just like, hey, I'm trying to eat real quick. Where should I go? I'm right here at the federal courthouse, and oh, you go right here. There's a good spot. Like that's just it's like networking, right? It's not networking, but it's valuing the networks that you have and taking advantage of those, not in a predatory way or a destructive way. But shit, I don't really know a lot about San Diego, but I know people that I'm close to that do know about it. So when I go down there, it'd be cool to see them if we have time, maybe just for a few minutes, maybe spend the weekend. Who knows? Depends on the circumstance. But also kind of give me the lay of the land, right? Um, I'm gonna go over there to kick it at Chicano Park and take pictures and walk around and this and that. And if it was good, man, cool. Not good because they gave permission. Let's be clear too about this check-in thing. Um, I see it on TV, and maybe it happens in other areas, like maybe the East Coast or maybe different places. This happens. Um, I personally am not familiar with this idea of, like for example, with Chicano Park, right? Like I'm walking around taking pictures at Chicano Park, doing some straight tourism shit, right? And somebody comes up to me, hey, Jose, where you from? Right? Hey, well, so and so, give me permission to be here. Let me see, where's my phone? You could text them right now. It it's not that kind of check-in. We're like, oh, I'm like some of these other clowns that have been on here, but you come to my city, check in. Yeah, well, nobody's that important. Nobody, right? A neighborhood maybe, but a lot of that is if you're trying to go out there and get into stuff, right? Then yeah, because there's gonna be gatekeepers. Like, fool, why you posted up over here like you're somebody, homie? I ain't never seen you before. Nah, I'm with so and so. Okay, that makes sense, right? Um, that's a different situation. So I don't think that that's the norm. And when people talk about checking in when you go out of town, that's not what they mean. And when anybody who tells you that their name alone gives you a pass to do what you want and go where you want and act how you want in a city, unless your city's really, really, really small, that's some bullshit, right? That's not how it works. And even if somebody does kind of bring you into a space, you still got to know how to conduct yourself in that space, right? And still respect where you're at. Uh, that's really what it comes down to. That's why I love traveling, and that's why I never really have problems when I travel. I'm not a big tough guy. I don't walk down the street and people are scared of me, right? Um, but I don't walk down the street and try to scare other people either. You know, I respect what I do and respect where I am and have a little bit of common sense in terms of you know, I might not be welcome over there, right? It's not fear, it's common sense. But but then I get a lot of other places that I wouldn't necessarily go if not for somebody else being like, man, slide through. Oh, okay. And I value that. And I try to provide the same to other people when the shoe's on the other foot, right? So checking in at the end of the day is for most people that do it, um, is about respect. In a gang sense, no. You do not find many many Mexicans, Mexican Americans, Chicanos, whatever, from California who check in an official sense when they travel, right? Unless they're operating at a higher level. You know what I mean? That's different. But we're talking about at a street level. You don't really see that. You do see that more in other communities, but those are the reasons for it, though, right? Is those other communities sometimes have branches? They just different groups work different, and I'm not saying one's better or worse or this or that, and it's not because Mexicans are too proud to do it, and these other groups. It's just the circumstances line up different. But internally, a lot of us do it. Even like squares, I would think do that. You know, it's hey Tom, I'm going on vacation to Hawaii. You know what I mean? Like it it's not exactly the same context, but the spirit of it still remains. You know, and so that's all, man. That's my spiel on checking in terms of in the streets, right? And again, checking in prison, that's you're locking it up, right? It's you're validated. You check in, it means you go, hey, I want to go debrief, right? You're on the yard, you check in, it means, hey, I don't feel safe here anymore, right? Um, that's a very different checking in than what I'm talking about in terms of on the streets. And so, do people get taken advantage of sometimes on in this check-in? Sure, but I think they're the type of people that would get taken advantage of anyways, right? And they're the type of people that are also taking advantage, because if you're out there getting rich off of being from such and such, you're taking advantage of what that represents and what that stands for and getting paid off of it. So yeah, if you're not voluntary with it, you're probably going to get taken advantage of when you come back too. You know what I mean? But it's a two-way thing, right? It's not you're getting punked, it's you're doing punks type stuff, and so somebody's going to come in and cash that check for you. That's really what it is. Anyways, help others move in excellence, man. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it, and help your community because they need you. Catch you guys again.